What is happening, everybody? So, my brother Mark Leclerc from Canada. What's happening, brother? This video is for you. So, Mark posted up a pretty fun topic of conversation: cars that I've loved and cars that I've hated. So, cars that I've loved, let's start it off with something positive. If I were to imagine a world without Mopar or the Challengers or Chargers of today, what would be sitting in my garage right now? GT500, no question about it. I love GT500s. There's something to be said for a car that makes anywhere from 500 to 600 plus horsepower, big 5.4 liter V8 overhead cam at that, sitting under the hood with an upgradability that is basically the sky is the limit. And the fun part about that car is that it is unembarrassingly American in its approach. It's not lightweight. It's fairly heavy for its physical size. You can only get it with the manual transmission, which is kind of a drawback, but the reality is that you don't really need to worry about what transmission is in that car, because all you have to do is roll into that throttle with your right foot and you're lighting tires up in pretty much the first 4 gears, depending on the state of tune and what all you've done to that car. So they're a ton of fun. I've got a lot of really fun memories with GT500s and Terminator Cobras as well. They fall into this same kind of basic value, but there's always been something about that GT500 that kept keeping my interest. And again, with the friends that I've had that have owned them, I've worked on them in the past. I've got a combination in my head for one just sitting here in the chair that would be a riot. So yeah, that would probably be the one that I would own if it weren't for the Challenger being available today. A close second to that would probably be obvious choice, Fox Body Mustang. That one may fall into the category of favorite, mainly because that's what I got my start working on. It's what a lot of guys got their start working on. And because the aftermarket is just so friendly with that platform, you can build basically anything that you could possibly imagine, or build a multi-purpose car out of the same platform and not break the pocketbook in the process. So yeah, you want to build a high 11-second car that can also go around corners, get fairly good gas mileage, and be pretty reliable in the process, and not break the bank. There's your Fox Body, ready and willing to do whatever you ask of it. The downside to the Fox Body is they are a bit long in the tooth. They don't have any of the creature comforts that modern cars have today, but that's part of the good thing about them. And because of that, and because they're really the last gasp of air for old school V8 front engine rear drive cars, no traction nannies, no electronic stability control. About the best you could hope for in terms of safety is one airbag. Hey, sounds pretty much like an old school hot rod to me. So much upside, how could you possibly go wrong with that? So those are probably the two, or at least my two favorite cars. There's not really anything that comes to mind that I can just say, I really fell in love with this particular platform. I have owned Vipers in the past, but I've never really fallen in love with those cars, mainly because they were not really a one-trick pony, but it was just a little bit much. And even in a stock state of tune, I don't know, they just didn't quite give that warm and fuzzy fun feeling that you would get out of like a GT500 or a well-built Fox Body. So yeah, I enjoyed them. I had a lot of fun with them, but again, just not a favorite. But God, if I could find a clean 99 GTS, because I do know now what I didn't know then. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But getting into other cars that I've liked, my Lightnings have been a lot of fun in the past. And the funny thing about the Lightning is when you look at it really for what it is, kind of from an objective standpoint, it's a truck, first of all, but it's got a 2-valve 5.4 liter with really not that great of heads. It's topped off with a supercharger that is not very efficient. And still somehow those trucks manage to, with just a few modifications, be able to run mid to low 12-second quarter mile times, and quite frankly, they handled okay. Kind of hard to see it in the background. Right underneath that direct connection fender cover, there's a picture of me autocrossing my very first Lightning. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun with those trucks too. I've had two of them, and I've got to tell you that, God, there's some times where I just kind of wish I had one of them back. So yeah, a little bit nostalgia, more of a nostalgic pick with that Lightning than anything else. Now, that pretty much wraps it up for cars that I've really liked. There's been some other vehicles that I've owned, some that were extremely fast but problematic. Some trucks that I've owned that I still would have a soft spot for, but again, if I could just get my hands on either a GT500 or, I don't know, maybe another Fox body, you never know what's going to turn up. But cars that I haven't liked, all right, well, this is a little bit different because the cars that I've owned that I ended up not liking, there's only one that I can think of really off the top of my head that really strikes that chord well, and that's my 04 Z06. The problem with the 04 Z06 with me is that I never really felt comfortable in the car. It was more of an ergonomic thing. With the Vipers, I always felt like I could sit down in that car and it just felt right. The ergonomics in that car, for whatever reason with me, it was just so good. I just really loved the way that car kind of hugged around you. The Z06 didn't quite give that same impression, and the problem with the C5 that I had, it wasn't really with the car itself, but it was, again, just with the ergonomics, the steering position. It was real clunky. There was only really two steering positions that would work. I don't know. I just never really could get acclimated to that car. It was fun, LS6 with a cam, long tubes, a good solid tune, decent mid to low 11-second car, but I just never really got comfortable with it. So yeah, I guess that would be really the only one that I've owned that, yeah, I kind of wish I just didn't buy the car, is really more to the point. Not that I hated it, I just would have probably done well without it. Now, cars that I've driven that I didn't like. Well, I am on record as saying that I don't like the Gen 6 Camaro. And really, I don't like it for reasons that are, I guess I'm a little bit biased. First of all, let me just set the table for you. I like the Gen 5 Camaros quite a bit. In fact, when GM was releasing that Z28, I looked like, a kid at just waiting for a candy store to open. What's not to love? LS7, it's in a Camaro. What possibilities, right? I mean, this is like the perfect hot rod, and I'm thinking to myself, this is my next car, before it was released. And then it was released to the tune of $70-something thousand. It broke my heart. Basically, I felt like I was left on my front doorstep on my prom date. Peace out. Thought you were going to get some of this, but nope. So, yeah, that's kind of one of the positions I was coming from when I was looking at the Gen 6 Camaro SS. But taking it away from my own personal, wambulance trip, with that stupid Z28, what I didn't like about the Camaro was that, to me, it seemed like Camaro was trying to be more Mustang than Mustang. In other words, it's smaller, it's got a bigger engine, and technically speaking, yes, it's quicker and faster, but the ergonomics, again, just didn't seem to fit. And on top of that, the styling just wasn't quite there. And for me, it just seemed a little bit too sports car-ish to be considered a pony car. Well, my opinion of that changed with the 1LE package. Now, to me, the 1LE makes perfectly good sense. It's a true sports car now, as opposed to being just a smaller car with a larger engine with no real styling cues to speak of, with its only mission to dethrone Mustang at being the Mustang. So, in saying that, yeah, I'm not a big fan of like a 1SS or a 2SS, but for some reason, in my head, the 1LE just seems to make sense. So, although I haven't driven a 1LE, I have driven the Gen 6 Super Sports, and man, I don't know. It's almost like it felt to me like it could have been so much better, especially considering the price point. But again, comparing that to the Gen 5, a car that I actually really do like, it just seemed to be less of a Gen 5 than more of a pony car, or more of a, I don't know, more of a type of car that I would actually want to live with on a daily basis. So there's those in a nutshell. And really, when I'm talking about cars that I don't like, it's not to say that the car is a bad car. It just means that in some cases, maybe it didn't fit me well, or in other cases, it could be a situation where maybe I've taken a car too far. And that's one of the things I didn't quite mention yet, but there's cars that I've owned that I liked, and then I took a little bit too far in terms of modifications and basically ruined the car in the process. I had a 94 Cobra Mustang with a Kuntz & Company 427 and a T-trim supercharger. Car made an insane amount of power, but the problem is that it broke something practically about every second or third time that I drove it. The output shaft to a TKO 5-speed, I didn't break it, I bent the splines. It's a whole lot easier to break those things than to bend them. So, but it was weird stuff like that. K-members break, it just a lot of weird stuff. But that was a really cool car if it just wasn't making the kind of power and wasn't taken to such a high level. Should have been done a little bit differently, admittedly. But that being said, can't turn back the clock. That's what I'd like to have back. I've had other cars that would probably fall in the category of, man, I wish I wouldn't have bought this car. The Z06 was one of them, but I had a Superformance Shelby Cobra, and that car, it was a Mark III Shelby Cobra. That car with a big block, making about 520-ish horsepower out of a 30 over 460 with Super Cobra jet heads and a single plane with a 950 HP. That car was scary fast. I never took it to a drag strip. I autocrossed it a couple of times, but I can tell you that that particular car, of all the cars that I've ever owned, regardless of what ET they ran, that car was hands down the scariest. That car, from just a roll in fourth gear, if you were to roll on the throttle real quickly, there's a chance you would get a significant amount of tire spin out of that thing. That's the kind of power to weight ratio the car had. Making about I'm going to say between 5.25 and 550 horse, just to be conservative. And the car weighed 2,700 pounds without me in it. So, yeah, spooky to say the least. And I kind of wish I had that one back too. Unfortunately, times were tough and I had to sell it, but if I get my hands back on that car, I'd probably put a small block in it. Anyway, those are some of the cars that I've owned, some of the cars that I've driven, and some of the vehicles that I've experienced over the years that I've really had a good time with. Some of them maybe sold a bit short. Maybe my opinions were based on previous biases, but hey, I'm only human. We got to base our judgments on our past experiences, and that's what I'm doing here. So post up your comments. Let me know if you've got some cars that you've owned that you wish you had back, or maybe some cars you wish you hadn't taken so far. And also let me know if there are some cars you wish you just wouldn't have bought in the first place. And that's a wrap on this one. Y'all take it easy. Adios.